about speed trap number 2, which happens in the lumbopelvic or hip region. There are 2 common muscular imbalances to begin with in this particular area. You've got Donald Duck posture, and these are the guys who basically have their butts sticking out way up in the air. They're really hyperextended in the low back, and it always looks like they're falling forward, like Donald Duck. And then the opposite end of the spectrum is you've got these guys who look like Pink Panther, who their butt totally tucks under, and they just look like they have no butt at all, and it's just a long back that turns into legs. Those are 2 common muscular imbalances that need to be addressed in order to increase your speed, because if they're not, you're not going to get the full flexion and extension at the hip that's associated with the power of explosion. The first muscular imbalance that's associated with the Donald Duck posture is people who have really tight hip flexors. So your hip flexors, which most people don't know, are attached to your, you can imagine that these are the hips, this is the spine, this is the leg going down. The guys looking straight ahead. The hip flexors are attached to the lumbar spine. So the tighter the hips become from sitting all day long, the more they look like they're in a perpetual sitting posture. The butt is out, the lumbar spine is extended because this muscle is pulling down on them, and the hips are in a perpetual flex. When you're flexed to that degree, there's no extension allowed when you sprint or when you jump. So, like I showed you before, with the upper body, there's a lower cross. And that tends to be having a very tight low back, and these are your athletes whose back always hurt them, and tight hip flexors. On the other end of that cross, you end up having very weak abdominals, and it probably ends up looking more like this, because those guys have a belly that kind of sticks out, and very weak hamstrings. These are your athletes that are probably going to pull their hamstrings more often than not. So that's muscular imbalance number 1. You can imagine what we're going to teach you is how to stretch the low back, stretch the hip flexors, and on the other side of that, strengthen the abdominals, especially the deep stabilizers of the hip, and strengthen the hamstrings. On the flip side, if you've got your, hope that all makes sense. On the flip side, if you've got your Pink Panther posture, these guys who have really flat backs and their butt tucks under, they have really tight hamstrings. These are your athletes that need to stretch their hamstrings. The other guys really shouldn't stretch their hamstrings because they're probably already very long. So they've got tight hamstrings which are like pulling down on their hips. It almost looks like someone's tugging their butt under. Their hip flexors happen to be very open. I'm using the wrong colors here. Their hip flexors tend to be very open. So you've got tight hamstrings pulling down on your hips. Bang! You might even have tight upper abdominals pulling down on your rib cage. So a lot of times they look like this, if you can imagine. The flip side is these of your athletes have weak lower backs. So this muscle needs to be strengthened, and the hip flexors are usually very wide and open. That's why it looks like their hips are jutting forward and their back looks very flat. There's no arch in their back. You can imagine that these athletes aren't going to express their full sprinting potential because they're in a perpetual extend. They're not flexing so that they can get the full power associated with sprinting and jumping like a badass athlete. So what we need to do is stretch and strengthen properly and then reteach the neuromuscular system, build the motor engrams that are associated with full flexion and extension in a powerful fashion.
Alright guys, so speed trap number 2. We went over 2 different types of posture deformations that basically athletes start to develop. We'll go over the first one, which is very popular. It's probably about 60, 70 to about 30, 40% of the athletes. The 60-70 is probably going to be your Donald Duck, which Elliot described as the butt up in the air, the real tight hip flexors. The iliopsoas goes from here, integrates over here by the spine. And what that does is it drives the hip flexor to shorten. We need to go ahead and lengthen that as much as possible. The way we're going to do that is we're going to basically come here. We're going to put our back foot on it. There's a couple progressions. Let me start off with the easiest one first. The first one is going to be a lunge. And you're just going to take a huge step and you're going to feel the pull here. Next, we're going to raise the arm. You'll feel the stretch come through right through here. And if you have really, really tight ones, that's when you'll want to prop your foot up and eventually sink back into it and really pull here and really stretch that out. On the other hand, though, they tend to have really weak abdominals and they're not linked to their hip flexors. So what happens is some of the athletes need to go ahead and be able to transfer that energy. Here's the exercise that we're going to have you do for that. It's going to look just basically like this. You're going to be grabbing, let me turn this way so you can see it. But what you're going to do is you're going to grab something behind you. You're going to press your lower back into the ground, really activating your core. And then from there, you're just going to be coming here and shifting down while you're focusing on your lower back, squeezing that ground. Pretend you have something between your lower back and the ground and you really want to smush it. So what you're going to do is you're just going to come here and bring your heels to the ground. Really, really tightly while your back is squeezing the ground. The next one we had was the Pink Panther. That's when you saw the athletes with no butt. They're really pulled inside. They're really, really tight hamstrings. All we're going to do is something called a waiter's bow. You're going to have perfect aligned posture from the top of your head to your hip. And basically what you're going to do is have one foot out and you're just going to take like a waiter's bow. You're going to keep this whole thing in line and just bend right at the hip. Look, just like this. You're going to feel a stretch all through here. Same thing on the other side. Bring the foot out. Stretch all through here. Just like that. Now the thing that we're going to do to activate here is they tend to have their hip flexors aren't necessarily activated. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to take a band, slide it through just like this. All you're going to do is put it around your ankle. You're going to get some tension going on it. You're just going to stay completely straight. You're going to lift at 90 degrees and then push your toe out and hold it there. You're going to feel it very uncomfortable on your hip flexors, your iliopsoas. What that's going to do is it's going to really activate and recruit the motor fiber, the motor patterns within your hip flexors. Here's the thing though, the Pink Panther posture, the problem with them is they're going to want to lean back like this. You're going to want to maintain and focus that your nose is over your toe, that the foot is not up on. So if I'm raising my right leg, I want my nose to be more forward than my left toe. Just like this. See how it's aligned right here? And that's it for speed trap number 2, guys.